Well, welcome to Kramer Talk. Robert Kramer here today. Before I introduce my great guest here, Kramer Talk brings together analysts, vendors, customers, industry leaders for conversations about really trends in ERP, supply chain, data, AI, the future of enterprise technology. And I like to say the focus isn't necessarily on product announcements. It's really about the people, their experiences, the lessons learned that they have that can help us and help organizations navigate change really in a better business environment. So today, Martin Taylor joins us, and he here to discuss his experience. He's on the other side of the vendors as a customer and as a CIO, as a technology leader, his views on enterprise technology. And we'll get into some of the things that I just talked about, but he spent a lot of time navigating all these different trends. So Martin, how you do today? And thank you for joining me.
Hey, good afternoon, Robert. Yeah, doing well. It's nice Friday afternoon. So I'm not in the office today, which is always a good thing. So I'm sitting at home, which is a nice. So yeah, very pleased to join your call.
Thank you so much. We all got here for different reasons. I guess we're older now, so we don't necessarily aren't trying to start our careers, and we end up where we're at because of our experiences. And you spent over 25 years in the technology industry as a CIO and different other angles as well, helping companies and different industries. Before we kind of ask a lot of different questions, how did you end up here? Like, why, when you grew up, did you want to be a policeman or in the fire department? You grew up in England, but you navigated your way over to the US, and technology was something that you've learned a long time ago, but how did that start?
Yeah, great question. Without going too far back in my past and unearthing everything, but no, yeah, I've lived in the US now for 20 years and certainly grew up in the UK. And honestly, from being, I don't know, mid-teenage years, I've always been a bit of a technology nerd, teaching myself to code in my bedroom. I was one of those kids that locked myself in my bedroom, teach myself to code rather than playing sports, which is probably not the greatest thing, but it's who I.
Which code?
Yeah, I started life. Oh shoot! It was actually I originally started coding in BASIC, sitting in my room of all things, right? But yeah, then went on to, after graduating kind of a business degree, went on to into world of actually just companies, and I was a coder and a business analyst initially, and then grew from there into different roles until we found ourselves in the US, and found myself in various different technology leadership positions and CIO positions, generally in larger companies, quite often traveling the globe doing that.
So did it help you in a way to look at the way technology trends are happening and how you advise the companies you work for? Because like when you know the foundation of how these systems work, you can kind of have the foresight of how they're going to play out. So then you kind of have a leg up. And even if, kind of a caveat to that question, how do you explain it to a business owner, because your mind's working in a different way than his is? You kind of understand such a different math equation than they do.
As I look at myself, as I've gone through my career, I would say that I've had some lessons learned along the way myself by pretty tough CEOs and business leaders. As I think about, you roll your sleeves up and get involved in a server or a piece of code or whatever in the system. That's one part of your life. But if you're working as part of a business, realistically, I mean, it has to start with where's the business value of everything you're doing. So I've probably gone through various stages of being schooled by CEOs and other leaders and learning that journey. And so, but along the way, I mean, I very definitely think about technology as being one of those things that it's only any value if it's growing revenue, reducing costs, better customer experience, those kind of things, and really starting with it from a business value perspective. And you've got to start there in every conversation. Sure. That's super critical as a CIO as well, or any kind of technology leader. If you're not approaching the conversation like that, you won't engage your audience. You won't be part of the leadership team if you're not able to do that.
So my father had an ERP company for the chemical distribution and manufacturing industries. And he always told me, like, this is a differentiator. This is a competitive advantage. They have to use the system to get the outcomes that you're talking about. If they're only going to use it just to record information, it's not going to give them what you're talking about. And we tried to see things from the customer angle because it's what it is. I mean, the customers don't care about the technology. They care about the technology performing. So that's a big difference because you're not looking to just drive the shiny new red car. You're looking for the shiny new red car to be efficient. So you're not using so much gas that it outprices itself. But
I would say there's technology leaders or technologists, and actually therefore vendors as well selling these products have got to earn their seat at the table to start with. I mean, these are almost table stakes a little bit.
Yep.
It's like, does the thing run? Does it work? Does it stay alive? Does it perform properly? I think as time's gone on, that's become increasingly more the way of thinking about it. A lot of times business leaders don't really care about that sort of stuff so much. It's an expectation that if it's not doing those things, why are you even at the table talking to me?
Right.
So I think that's a core element that you've got to be able to approach any business conversation with. You've got to get the basics right. So I think if you think about how vendors come to the table to a business, one of the things that they're not frequently not getting right, if they don't get the fundamentals right, and what they really want to do is introduce a new capability on their platform, then if they can't stand up there and pass the red face test about having the Git process is not running correctly, or the system upgrade process wasn't working effectively, it is extremely difficult for those guys to have a conversation with a company about the next new great thing that they want to do. And I think as a tech leader inside one of those organizations, every time that vendor fails, they're not only failing themselves, but they're actually making it look like the technology department internally is failing to deliver that service at the same time. So they sort of lose the credibility, not only with the CEO, but they're losing the credibility with the CIO as well to be able to have those conversations. So and that's quite often a thing that's not really understood, that you've got to get that right first, sort of fundamental.
Yeah, I mean, that's so well said because so many vendors talk about their features and capabilities, but not the outcomes. But before that is the credibility and the trust that you're talking about, which is probably more important than the latter. But at the same time, these customers are looking for not necessarily replacing their processes, but they want processes to be fixed where there's gaps. So I don't want technology to come in to fix things that are already working. I have gaps. I need to be a better company with what I have, not just show me, again, back to that shiny new red car. I need I don't want to change things that are working. I want to fix things that aren't.
Right. Absolutely right. And I think vendors are getting better at that. They're getting better at understanding and explaining things from a business perspective, thinking about the value they deliver, the speed they deliver, and so on. They are getting better at that. They are understanding that for sure. Where they sometimes miss as well, other than support, is that they've got to recognize that they have to be a partner with the CIO in bringing this forward to the business. And the thing that I mean, most tech leaders understand this, is when the CEO comes back from the last trip or through an airport and sees that shiny billboard advertising something and says, hey, I want one of these, go get me one of those. CIO's going to go, whoa, wait a minute, understanding it from all these different things. It sort of creates this kind of tension a little bit between the CIO or the IT leader and the vendor, rather than the vendor acting kind of in a partnering way with the tech leader and bringing that forward. And there's lots of things they've got to kind of work on a little bit around those things, so that it's coming out in the right way. Probably the best way to say it.
So what's changed the most in the business aspect from technology leaders today, especially as AI becomes a bigger part of the conversation? Meaning, so maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it might have been a little easier because there was a turnkey solution. You knew what you had, you knew what you were missing, you filled the gaps with other softwares. It's confusing now with the vendors proposing all these different things. There's a lot of hype. You have to get through the noise. AI, is it a tool or do you want to do business with AI companies? That's confusing. But your goal, work your way backwards from the outcome, is to give the best technology for the most efficiency, to grow the business with the same amount of people, to bring ROI to the highest level, to not cause confusion between you and the CEO. And then the workforce has to be able to adapt and adopt new technology where the mindsets are on board. How do you pull it all together? And I guess, so what's the biggest change from 5, 10 years ago to today? Because it's a different role.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the role of the CIO or tech leader. I don't I have aversion to saying CIO. Really, that sounds like a highfalutin title. But as a tech leader, an IT leader in the business, I mentioned earlier on the kind of like table stakes. There is a table stakes for a tech leader to come into the table. Things like the governance and security, compliance, resilience of the system, architecture still count. And the IT leader carries those for the organization, right? Just like the CFO carries closing the books, you might say, carries that same thing. Right. What has happened over time is that the CIO actually has to get even closer to being a business leader, not just a tech leader. So being part of the business team and speaking in terms of the business processes, the P&L statements, the business strategy, customer experience, they have to be talking in those terms increasingly, not just the technology stack underneath. And I think what happens is, and this has been happening for a long time, the CIO actually, and really certain members of the technology department carry probably a uniquely broad view of how an organization runs compared to many other functional areas, because those functional areas have to use technology. So the CIO has to engage with them and suddenly knows how the HR processes work and how the financial processes work and how that warehouse works, things like that. You're sort of in the middle of all those things and have a very uniquely broad view. So I think when you're thinking about it in terms of being part of the leadership team, you're able to stitch those pieces together as part of a conversation and engage as a leader like that. I think that's a phenomenal difference when you come to a table as a CIO versus other particular positions. And you bring a lot of value with that.
Which can be daunting because your role is so complex and you make it look easy. And then when you step away, people are like, well, how do we pull all this together? There's more to do today than there was 5 or 10 years ago, based upon what you just said.
There really is. And what companies are starting to do is saying, hey, we want to do these new things. So let's create a new innovation group or an AI group and kind of segment that off to the side and think that they can run faster. And in some regards, they can, right? The challenge with that is, unfortunately, you kick off an innovation group or an AI group, and guess what? Underneath it is still security and governance and data and all those things. And I think what has to happen is not that suddenly CIO now is the only one that can own innovation, but that connection, that partnership between the CIO and business leaders has to become tighter, not separated. Yeah. And I think that can happen with organizations. I've been part of that myself, and that's created a lot of tensions in an organization to move forward. And it's something that organizations have got to think about basically as they put structures in place.
So you've been through a lot with ERP and enterprise transformations. And I think this is such a big point in evolution for ERP because it's changing. I mean, in some cases, we're kind of rewinding what the customers need, but we're fast forwarding to where the technology is, where it's changing, but the customers want it simpler. They don't want 20 vendors doing the same thing or filling in areas that aren't necessary. They want a more turnkey solution. They want more of a platform. They want an ecosystem that's tight. So when you see AI and data more involved, because 10 or 15 years ago, you closed the books, you moved on to the next month or the next year, and the data was somewhat important, but now the trickle down is gigantic and AI is dependent on it. So ERP is being changed for the better. More, we're not there, but we're getting there to a fully event-driven system. So how do you see AI and data changing ERP and the roles these systems will play across the business? Do you think there's an evolution, like I just mentioned, being on the other side, using a manufacturing ERP system? Is it changed yet on your end? Is it complicating things, or do you see the light at the end of the tunnel, or a combination?
It's a deep question, that one, Robert. There's so many layers, unfortunately, to it. I see a lot of, like, maybe small, medium-sized companies looking at the world of AI going, what the heck do I do with this? But also, I need to get a widget out the door, and my ERP is not working properly. And what the heck is CRM anyway? They're kind of 5 steps behind where the industry thinks they are. There's a lot of catching up to do with those things. And I think when I walk into an organization now, as I'm working as a fractional CIO, my starting journey looks at a simpler dynamic of what has to happen with an organization to get them to a good playing field of what they're operating with.
Mm-hmm.
The AI aspects of things is sort of like, okay, and now how do we layer in AI on this once you've got the basics running correctly? I think if you think about AI, however, you've got to ask yourself, with those AI technologies coming along, I'm going to go back to what Kana said right at the beginning, if you like, of this conversation, which is you've got to look at business value. So there's kind of like a nice, neat 2x2 matrix I quite often use. On one axis, you've got value, and another is difficulty or ease of implementation. You sort of find yourself with a nice quadrant on that going, this particular technology, whether it's AI or other transformational technology, is it low-hanging fruit? Does it get big value? And can I implement this easily? Well, you're going to start with those things.
Yep.
And you're going to do just like with AI, just like what you are with any technology. You're going to run a pilot. You're going to iterate. You're going to scale. You're going to be a little cautious as you step into that. I think there are certain areas of technology that come along in the world of AI. If I think about something like concept of orchestration, well, a year ago, when the concept of orchestration was there, people were building their own orchestration solutions to deliver that. Well, you don't need to build one of those anymore. So you have to look back and go, well, we spent months building an orchestration layer. It's like, well, why did we do that versus just kind of adopting what we could? I found myself running down some of those paths myself and getting it wrong. You've got to be careful what you bite off on, basically, I think, as you move forward. Other things I would suggest as well is that when you're looking at bringing in certain technologies, and AI's another one, you might say, you have to look at the vendor itself and where they're coming from. You shouldn't just look at the product, but you have to look at the vendor, as in how small they are. If they have 2 people working for them, you're going to hold on a second, what is this thing? Is this really something we want to adopt? Versus a larger company that's is clearly an integral part of their roadmap, then you may take a more serious look at about how that's going to develop out. And is this something we should put a foot into the world of? So I think those are some key aspects you've got to look at. And there's many others, but hopefully that gives a perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting you said about the vendor, because I think that, am I more worried about the vendor or my cost, or both? Because sometimes I can get killed on the vendor where the costs aren't really as big of a deal. I mean, is quality more important than the price?
Yeah, certainly. Sorry, go ahead, Robert. Sorry.
No. I've always thought like price is second to quality. I need to make sure that my business, no matter what, business outcomes are above anything else. So the business outcomes, the manufacturing, the production, I can't adopt new technology in my production lines down. Everything has to work around us. This business is number one. And if I have to pay more and my quality's better, I'm more interested in that. I just wanted to get your take on that, because a lot of times CIOs, they have to align around budgets and price, but sometimes what I just mentioned is more important because it's going to get us a higher outcome it's like getting what you pay for always.
Yeah.
I just mentioned the two people versus an organization. If you go get your car fixed, you get it fixed 2 blocks away or 100 miles away. You got half the price 100 miles away, but what if it breaks again? I got to take it back. With the 2 miles, I'd rather pay more and I go back, to a closer one. But anyway.
No. I agree. I agree with you. I actually have a line that I use at work on this thing, and there's a fine line on it, but I'll tell you the line, and then you'll understand why it's a fine line. But I quite often say to folks that work for me, I said, listen, nobody's going to fire me if I spend a little bit too much, but they will fire me if it doesn't work.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
So I think obviously that's where the fine line of don't spend too much comes. But you got to do the right thing. You got to do the right thing for the process, and not at the expense of spending that little bit less. Right? You got to do the right thing. So I agree. I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
And the I think calculation with vendors is that they don't see what's most important to the customer, meet the production plant, getting procurement, taking care of the customer, shipping, billing. That's number one. I asked people this magic question, and it's interesting how many people say the wrong answer. But I said, if your ERP is down and your CRM is down, which is more of a problem? And 75% of the people say CRM. I'm like, do I really care about my sales people? No. They know everything in their head. So I'm just documenting the information in CRM so it helps production. But if my production is down, the business is down. But
I would clearly say ERP for that as well, because that can break so many areas of your business if your ERP's down. I mean, you can't get product out the door, right? You can't bring revenue in if your ERP's down. CRM, yes, it's your pipeline, but it'll be your pipeline tomorrow as well, right? So I agree 100%. Yeah.
It's an interesting question. So just getting into just a few more questions, but AI depends on good data. And we talked a little bit about ERP being the system of record, but also it depends on good data, processes, integration, areas many companies have struggled with for years. And it's because of everything we've talked about. But one of the things I do like about AI is it's exposing the problems to help businesses. But do you think that that's a problem or an asset or both?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think that, yes, it does. Simple answer to you, it does expose it. But if I look back historically and I look at BI or business intelligence or reporting analytics side of things, that also was one of the technologies that came out that also exposes poor data. Mm-hmm. And in fact, quite often people will build BI capabilities, and one of the first things it does, we've got to do is, let's use the reports that come out to help us fix the data so that the BI reports are coming out. I got that same notion about it. The other thing that's it's not just data though as well. I mean, if you think about in an organization, say your accounting and finance organization, they may run reports, and then Billy Bob in the accounting team goes, oh yeah, that particular thing I need to go get from this spreadsheet instead of it being on the ERP system because it's a little bit different and something's funky about it. So I need to bring that in and recalculate those things. So when you have those data issues that BI exposes, it's not just data, it's your process issues, it's external knowledge in your environment. And I think that both AI is also forcing the view of those inconsistencies of your data and your processes and causing you to have problems as a business. Now, the difference from AI compared to BI that I would layer on, it comes in sort of some of the later stages with AI. It becomes more consequential when AI moves away from just presenting you information into a deep level of reasoning and into actions maybe by agents. Because now you're going to kick off the wheels to say, okay, based upon what you find, go take actions from it. And that agent may not know about Billy Bob's spreadsheet out there that calculates it a different way, which is more accurate. Yep. So you have to be really cautious about stepping into that world and really think about it in terms of the human in the loop side of things, and where does that happen? And you have to think about it from how do I manage that process, and what do I let AI continue to do without having somebody in the loop of managing that?
When you took the role that you're currently at, was the data in the shape that you wanted it to be, or was it bad, decent, or great?
No, I mean, it's running the business like you always expect, but if you want to do more with it, more analytics with it, without having users chase it around so much, no, it's got a lot of holes in it for sure.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've seemed to have inherited an initiative to go start cleaning up, not just handling IT, but cleaning up the data, which is maybe an indication of a further move to closer to business processes as well, and bringing together a business team to do that. But that's yeah,
That's
absolutely.
positive. Are the holes because duplications or missing fields or inconsistencies or bad governance or all the above?
I mean, bad governance is a thing that overarches all of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, missing data, incorrectly filled in, duplicate customers, whatever they may be, pricing not quite right across different things. I mean, it's almost every shape of everything is in the middle of all of that. It tends to what happened for sure.
And organically, I guess, built up like that because of just chains of commands, different people working there, people
Right.
telling people don't use this ship to use this one or make a new one or um,
Exactly.
and what's interesting is when you look at these systems and you look at the product fee master files, the customer master files, and they're not filled out correctly, and people are like, "Well, we only just put the bare minimum in, and we just did this." There's a
Right.
reason why they're there because when you go to your BI reporting, the it's magical what can come out when you have everything filled in and the data is accurate. That's the whole point, and people
Right.
just don't understand that 100%.
You're absolutely right. What's interesting about, and just to add a flavor on that around data, if you bring AI into the picture around data, it can help you. It can help you manage your data. And some other work I've been doing on building some systems myself. I've sort of got deep in the world of AI development myself, even that you're able to leverage AI to help you manage, clean the data to business leaders that listen, by not doing this cleaning and not looking at this and not taking care of this, it's costing you this. It's
Yep.
causing these transactions to be incorrect. Now, trying to build that out historically with standard coding, standard ERP, even with BI, becomes extremely difficult to build out. Well, suddenly you've got this reasoning engine that's really helped you able to work through this, that gets you to be able to pull this together that much easier. It's phenomenally different, actually.
That's a great point because what's the cost for having bad data? And
Yeah.
I think it's a significant cost. And then if you switch from bad data to good data, that gap is probably pretty significant. It could be a 10% swing on profit or 5% or I
Yeah.
mean, it makes a huge difference. And it's probably a good sales internal tool to leverage.
I think it could be one of those things as ERP companies look forward is how can they leverage AI capability to show a customer, by having this kind of crazy mess out there, you're missing these sales, you're missing this cost, you've got too much working capital in your inventory, you've got this, and this is why, and this is where it is, gets to those things that much faster. I truly believe that's the case. I think so. It's a strong selling point, you're right, for an ERP platform that fundamentally has that data built into it and the kind of the governance and controls as part of that.
And when you have to have a sale, that's not a good thing because that means that someone messed up on inventory or something of that nature. And that's
Absolutely.
yes. So we'll kind of wrap things up, but based on your experience in making these just major technology decisions, what should enterprises expect from vendors and partners today that maybe be different from 5 or 10 years ago? Like what's changing? What's changed? And then maybe as you look ahead, what advice would you have, or where do you think we're going from all of this automation?
Yeah. So I would say that what should organizations expect from vendors as something? My history is in my last company working with a couple of large platforms. One very open APIs, kind of created an environment that you could work in. Both of them were ERP-like. So instead of creating a walled garden that you've got to work within, it creates more of an ecosystem that you can work within, and it enables you to build upon it. The other platforms there very much had a walled garden, which made it very difficult to get data in and out of, wanted to keep hold of this stuff. And unfortunately, what happened is the company started to migrate more towards their platform that had more of an open API view and feel to it, which I think is really what ERP vendors have really got to think about. Is not just creating walled garden, but actually how do I create an ecosystem that people can develop within, and then even take some of those developed ideas and incorporate them inside the system. I think that's something that ERP vendors should really think about. They're going to face, as they look forward, I think development of technology is going to become dramatically cheaper with AI. I think that's something that ERP vendors really need to think about. The buy versus build equation changes. That's a key thing. So we've always been pushed into a direction of go buy it, don't build it. Well, I think that is changing a little bit. You've just got to be careful as a CIO. Do I really want to build it, and what should I build it in? I think it means that from an ERP system perspective, which I know is one of your core areas of topics, it means that small ERP vendors are probably going to be able to more tap into other capabilities through these APIs and be more flexible in their growth and the customers they can approach. Larger guys develop and build those things out, but I think they're going to have a more expensive journey to tap into those capabilities, is what it feels like. That's those two. So I think companies should watch some of the smaller ERP vendors a little bit more, because I think they're going to start being more nimble and being able to tap into some of those capabilities better.
Well said. Well, Martin, thank you for joining today on Kramer Talk. This has been fantastic. Robert Kramer, Martin Taylor, thank you for joining. Martin, if you can just stay on while we finalize the recording, I appreciate it. But thank you, everybody.